the skies above Guadalcanal, two ace fighter pilots engaged in a legendary dogfight during the Second World War.
It was one of the epic air battles of all time, eyeball to eyeball, gun to gun, aircraft to aircraft.
This was a high noon battle between America and Japan.
You had to get in really close back in those days, like a knife fight. So you had to have the target fill the windscreen and then press the trigger.
During the skirmish, each pilot had the other in his gun sights. But for reasons that have never been explained, neither went in for the kill. Were there acts of chivalry, loss of nerve, or mechanical malfunctions? 64 years later, the deep jungles of this tiny island may finally set the record straight. The recently discovered wreckage of the American pilot's plane is bringing to light the true story of the dogfight over Guadalcanal. In 1942, two rival fighter planes fought for supremacy of the war-torn Pacific skies. One was the Japanese Imperial Navy's Zero, the other the U.S. Navy's Wildcat. One of the earliest battles between the two planes came on August 7, 1942. It was an extraordinary test of man and machine. The planes were flown by two talented pilots, Saburo Sakai and Pug Sutherland. Each wrote a detailed memoir about their encounter. It was the best documented dogfight of the Pacific War.
I could hear the steady stream of bullets zinging in behind me. The after part of my fuselage was like a sieve.
Never had I seen an enemy plane move so quickly or so gracefully before. Every second his guns were moving closer to the belly of my fighter.
The outcome of the engagement remained uncertain until the very end. And even as the two pilots battled, they admired each other's tenacity, courage, and flying skills. Both men were at the top of their games and had grown up dreaming of becoming pilots. Saburo Sakai was 25, a proven ace with more than 50 combat kills. Sakai was from samurai ancestry, and his military training had embodied the feudalistic warrior philosophy. He was even well schooled in the demanding martial art of sumo. The Japanese fighter pilot program graduated only a handful of elite pilots, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in toughness and skill.
Training in the Imperial Armed Forces was extremely disciplined, extremely difficult. It was downright brutal. Physical punishment was a fact of life in all of Japan's armed forces. Being punched in the face, being hit in the buttocks with baseball bats. But this was all par for the course. Sumo wrestling, for example, was meant to instill an aggressive spirit in them. You were in the ring with your opponent, and if you lost, you had to stay there until you prevailed over somebody.
In Sakai's year, only 25 of 70 non-commissioned officers survived the course. Sakai not only survived, he received the Silver Watch, given by Emperor Hirohito to the most outstanding student pilot. Pug Sutherland came from a very different background. He was trained as an officer at the U.S. Naval Academy, and his goal was to be selected for carrier duty. Pug's fellow cadets knew him well for his fierce determination and exceptional skill.
Pug was an excellent pilot. Pug, of course, means pugnacious. And he had been a boxer at the Naval Academy, very aggressive type, very competent, very cheerful individual. A lot of fun to be with.
Like Sakai, Pug had great ambition. His ability to avoid punches easily transferred to ducking and diving in the air. And he became one of the best shots in his squadron. But unlike Sakai, Pug had no combat experience. He was desperate to engage the enemy and wouldn't have long to wait. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States declared war. Sakai was not involved in the raid, but was out escorting Japanese bombers that were targeting U.S. military bases in the Philippines. When American fighters launched a counterattack, Sakai claimed his first American kill. While Sakai was doing battle over the Pacific, Sutherland was 5,000 miles away on an aircraft carrier patrolling the Atlantic. But soon after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. began redeploying troops to meet the Japanese onslaught. Pug's ship was among those sent west. By June of 1942, intelligence reports indicated that the Japanese were building a landing strip on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. The base would be a major threat to the Allied shipping lanes connecting Australia and America. So the U.S. began planning its first major offensive to prevent the runway's completion. Admiral Chester Nimitz ordered a 3-carrier task force to head for Guadalcanal. They would be supporting 19,000 Marines and comprise the largest invasion force the U.S. had ever assembled up to that point. On July 7, 1942, the aircraft carrier Saratoga departed Pearl Harbor with Pug and his squadron aboard. The ship was equipped with Grumman Wildcats, the U.S. Navy's frontline fighters. As they steamed across the Pacific, the officers assembled for a pre-battle photo. It was a melancholy moment, as each wondered if he would still be alive when the next portrait was taken. On July 20th, the squadron lost 3 Wildcats and damaged 2 more while landing after a training exercise. The next day, Pug and his fellow pilots were briefed about the region they would be flying over. Having heard tales of cannibalism on the Solomon Islands, the pilots were cautioned not to approach the natives if they had to bail out. On August 7, 1942, 8 months to the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the invasion began. Shortly after dawn, U.S. battleships began shelling Guadalcanal and the neighboring island of Tulagi. Because of planning errors, only the 8 Wildcats under Pug's command were available to patrol the landing area. But the U.S. invasion took the isolated Japanese garrison by surprise, and the enemy was completely overwhelmed. They radioed for help, but the nearest Japanese base was 565 miles away in Rabaul, Papua New Guinea. The base commander, Rear Admiral Yamada Sadayoshi, faced a daunting problem. Guadalcanal was at the outside limit of his fighter's range. But with no other options, he ordered his planes to prepare for a counterattack.
We checked the distance from Rabaul to Guadalcanal. It meant a round trip of more than 1,100 miles without allowance for combat or storms, which would consume fuel in prodigious quantities.
As Sakai recorded in his journal, this would be the longest mission he had ever been asked to fly. But his fabled Mitsubishi Zero fighter plane was up to the task. By keeping its weight to a minimum, the engineers had conjured up the seemingly impossible, a fighter that combined extreme agility with phenomenal range. The U.S. Navy had nothing like it.
The Wildcat was at a serious disadvantage to the Zero. Without drop tanks that would fit under the wings, the Wildcat had a typical combat radius of about 200 nautical miles. Now that was fairly representative of most fighters that were flying at the time. But we knew almost nothing about the Zero. It could fly one way, 500 to 550 nautical miles, engage in a dogfight, and return to base all on one tank of gas. And consequently, when Zeros were showing up so far from land bases, the Americans